think that we have made it clear to the Israelis, and they're aware, that the safety of innocent Palestinians is still a great concern.
Let's move on now. Amid the escalating tensions on the northern border, Israel has struck Hezbollah targets in Lebanon. The simmering tensions between the two countries are now threatening to spill over to the rest of West Asia. The occupied West Bank has become a dangerous labyrinth, with Israel warning that it will respond to the ramped-up attacks from Hezbollah on its border with Lebanon. In recent days, Israeli defense officials have repeatedly said they will not tolerate threats from the Iran-backed militia. But so far, both sides have avoided escalating the conflict beyond exchanging artillery fire across the border. But days ago, Israel's defense minister suggested his forces could soon open a northern second front to push back the Iran-backed Hezbollah from the Lebanese border. Even the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu threatened that Israel will turn Beirut into Gaza if Hezbollah starts a war.
If Hezbollah chooses to start an all-out war, then it will by its own hand turn Beirut and southern Lebanon, not far from here, into Gaza and Khan Yunis.
In remarks cited by the Times of Israel, Israeli Defense Minister told a meeting that the government hoped to push back Hezbollah through diplomatic means. But if that failed, IDF will act with all the means at its disposal. Since the escalation, U.S. officials have scrambled to contain any expansion of the conflict. They also warned Hezbollah not to open a second front against Israel. U.S. officials also cautioned their Israeli counterparts against launching an attack north of the Lebanese border. But even as the fears continue to grow, missteps in the two-month war could push at least 80,000 residents located southwards of the Lebanon border towards utmost risk. Retired Colonel Rich Altzen is a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council and the Jamestown Foundation, and also a defense expert. He is now joining us live from Washington, D.C. Colonel Rich, good to see you and welcome to the show.
Thanks, Eric. Good to be with you.
In the initial stages of Israel's offensive on Gaza, Hezbollah did indicate that they are not willing to join the fight. But in the past few weeks, they have been engaging the Israeli forces in the north of Israel. What are you reading from this, and could they really prove to be a threat to Israel and also the region?
Well, they are, in fact, in a sort of a state of long-running hybrid warfare against Israel. The question is of timing. When do they decide to take their actions? They don't recognize Israeli sovereignty, for instance, over what's referred to as the Sheba Farms area along the Lebanese-Israel border. They consider Israel to be an occupying force on Lebanese territory. And Hezbollah's domestic legitimacy stems from their willingness to confront Israel. So there's definitely not a case where we have some good feelings or a modus vivendi between the two. Hezbollah is just deciding when to attack. And I think the deployment by the United States of naval vessels, including an aircraft carrier, to the Eastern Med area sent a strong deterrent message to Iran that filtered down to Hezbollah. Now, as more, and this is how I read the current situation, as there's more space developing between Israel and the United States, at least between Netanyahu and President Biden, on how this should unfold from here. For instance, with Netanyahu saying yesterday that he rejects the United States position on extension of Palestinian Authority administration into Gaza. I think the Iranians and Hezbollah by extension are exploring whether there's enough of a gap between Washington and Jerusalem that maybe that now's the time to start playing with a little more escalation.
Colonel Rich, can Israel afford a two- or three-way war? You know, you have Gaza on one end, you have Lebanon on the other, and then you have Yemen's Houthi rebels on another end without assistance from the West. And if Israel does go ahead with the offensive at its borders, what does that mean for the ongoing war in Gaza?
Well, you remember in 2006, this is sort of the pattern that happened. There was first a war for about 2 weeks or 3 weeks in Gaza, and then an escalation along the Lebanese border that led to an Israeli military operation into southern Lebanon. that went on for several months and did not conclude very satisfactorily from the Israeli perspective. I think that's a real risk here. I think there's a risk that that Israel gets pulled into a second front, major front in the north. Now, as to sustainability, anytime we're talking about a country at war, you have to ask 2 or 3 key questions about sustainability. First of all, do they have public support for it? And in Israel, they see this, most of the public supports sort of the campaign against both Hamas and would probably support operations against Hezbollah. So check, you have public support. Number 2, do they have sufficient fighting forces? They do. They have mobilized reserves, 300,000 if I remember the number correctly. Financially, they're in a good position to continue fighting the war. The big question now is for munitions, precision-guided munitions and things like that that are coming from the United States that are critical to Israel's conduct of war, is that secure? And I think if Hezbollah attacks first, they're secure. If Israel's seen as launching the escalation itself, then you might see the Biden administration metering out that aid a little bit more carefully, in which case it wouldn't be sustainable to have a large operation. So a lot depends on who strikes first.
Retired Colonel Rich Altzen is a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council and the Jamestown Foundation, and he's also a defense expert. Retired Colonel Rich Altzen, as always, thank you very much for talking to us today.
And you as well. Thank you.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.